How's it going, everybody? This is Ron Sparkman. I am the Chief Curiosity Correspondent for the Space Foundation Discovery Center, and thank you for joining us today on Space4U Live. And we have an incredible guest today. I'm actually going to have to read off a list, and we were just talking about this. I think it'd be shorter for me to say what Shawna doesn't do more than what she does do. So Dr. Shawna Panyda is a physician, an aquanaut, a citizen scientist, astronaut candidate, a speaker, a martial artist, a skydiver, a pilot, a singer, a model, and a laundry list of other things. So she's always doing incredible stuff, and we're going to dive into some of it. If you're interested in any of those things and you have any questions, please drop them in the comments below, and we're going to try to get to as many as we can. And we're really fortunate that Sean is going to be joining us for our Space Symposium that has just been recently updated with new dates. So make sure you check that out on spacesymposium.org, and you can get those new dates. And she's going to be doing a talk for us there as well. That's going to be inspiring the new gen track there. It's going to be really amazing. So, Dr. Shawna Panyda, welcome to the show.
Hey, Ron. Thanks so much for having me. It's my pleasure to be here. We have lots to talk about, I'm sure. So the question is how we'll fit it all in.
Exactly. That's going to be the fun part of it, though, is that there's really a lot. But let's kind of start with the beginning. You have an interest, obviously, in a lot of things, but it really seems to me that space is your biggest love. So what inspired that passion for space and really science in general?
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh, there's so much about what is one of the greatest challenges we face as a species, always pushing the boundaries, constantly exploring the unknown, still discovering new things, even after half a century of space flight, over half a century. For me, my passion is space medicine, which we can certainly talk about. And, we're still constantly discovering new things about, for example, for those who follow space medicine, we found out about a venous thromboembolism or blood clot in one of the internal jugular veins of the astronauts aboard the ISS at the end of last year. So there's all this discovery. It's high risk, high reward. It's a environment that's totally unlike one on Earth, and there's lots of planning, lots of resourcefulness, being kind of a space MacGyver. All of this is so exciting to me. So the easiest way to answer that question is, how could you not?
No, I mean that's the question with another question, right? So I'm gonna go with that one. And actually, that reminded me of something. Weren't you also recently in a commercial where you were doing a Mars analog? Was that you?
Yes, that was me. So that was with Land Rover, and it was in honor of the 50th anniversary of the Apollo 11 moon landing. And so we went back to the Mars Desert Research Station and recreated a lot of the EVAs, or extravehicular activities, we had done on my previous rotation. And it was really cool to kind of, in a very small way, be a part of history, because that short, what they call branded content, which is a different way of saying a 3-minute short film that's kind of a commercial, but also tells a story, that was bundled with the Apollo 11 First Steps film on CNN. So it was really, really cool. The team was incredibly professional. The cinematography, if you watch it, it's breathtaking, because they took a drone up to 700 feet and just got these amazing sprawling diasporas of the Utah desert. And for those who haven't been, you're in just outside Hanksville, and these sprawling red and white marbled landscapes, and you really feel like you're on Mars. So that was a really, really cool project. The team was so professional. It was just really fun to do, and it's really cool to contribute to the history of spaceflight, both looking back and looking forward. So it was a lot of fun.
And that's also not that's not the only history that you have when we discuss these ideas of training to sort of what it's going to be like to live on Mars. And you've done MDRS, and for people that don't know, that's the Mars Desert Research Station, and you've done that twice now. So that's really amazing. And I understand it's a really incredible experience, one that I'm actually looking into doing myself. So can you tell us a little bit about that, the isolation training, how you all went through that, and what your roles were on those missions?
Yeah, sure. So I've done a couple of space analogs. And so when we talk about an analog environment, we mean an environment that is analogous in one way or another to the spaceflight environment. So places like MDRS, or the Mars Desert Research Station, essentially emulate life on Mars, and you're essentially in a Mars simulation. And there's different analogs across the world. There's Lunaris in Poland, there's High Seas on the Big Island in Hawaii. And what you're trying to do is to the best of your ability, replicate some fidelity of living in space to learn more about what life in space might be like. Because if you're going to a place, say where the International Space Station, 400 kilometers up above the Earth, it's very expensive to send people to Earth. It's very risky. It's very resource limited. So you want to train as best as possible before you actually end up there. Before you want to know the unknowns to the best of your ability and train for them, because you don't want the first time you ever deal with emergency to be in this high risk environment. So MDRS is a space analog. And to your question, oh my gosh, what like it is? It is you're essentially living real life on fake Mars. And so if you're going outside, you're suiting up in an EVA or extravehicular activity.
I think we got you breaking up just a bit there. Shawna, are you still there? Maybe. Technical difficulties, gotta love it. Sometimes we get hit with these things. Everybody's using their internet these days from home, so sometimes we get these issues. Hopefully Shawna can hear me now. I don't know.
I see you. Okay.
Yeah. So we lost you for a few minutes. So we lost like the last sentence or two of what you were talking about there. After you said it was really, really fun, and then we lost you.
Yeah. So when you're talking about what it takes to go into an analog mission, it takes lots of things. It takes preparation, it takes planning, it takes the right team, it takes knowing your team, it takes having your objectives, having everyone agree to the objectives, be on board with them, prioritize, the mission, the safety, science, mission objectives, and then whatever else comes after that. So all of my analogs have, whether at MDRS or underwater, they've been tremendous fun. And they've taught me a lot about teamwork, leadership, followership, and living in isolation. So lots of lessons learned from the analogs that actually have a lot of applicability to life in the pandemic, as it turns out.
And analog missions aren't the only thing that I think I got a little feedback there. And analog missions aren't the only thing that you've been involved in when it comes to astronaut training. We are both part of the Project Possum Citizen Scientist Astronaut program, and it's an amazing program, and you've got to do a lot of really cool things with it. So let's talk a little bit about what the program is, if people haven't heard of it. And I'm sure you'll explain it a little better than I can.
Sure, yeah. So like many things in space, POSSUM is an acronym which stands for Polar Suborbital Science of the Upper Mesosphere. And it started off as a citizen science project to study noctilucent clouds up in the upper mesosphere. They exist 80 to 100 kilometers above the Earth's surface. And they're thought to be a marker of climate change, because what we're noticing from records, meteorological records, is that they're becoming more prevalent and existing at lower latitudes than they previously ever have. And the thought is it's because there's more breakdown products of carbon dioxide and methane in the upper mesosphere. So we want to know more about exactly what these clouds mean and what they meant. And so that was the initial premise of Project Possum. And the thinking was we would send up citizen scientists in suborbital vehicles to gather more data, more samples, more high resolution photo and video of these clouds. And then it just evolved from there. So the term citizen scientist astronaut comes from the happy byproduct of passing the 100-kilometer line, the carbon line, where space begins, and as a happy byproduct of doing science, you get the term astronaut. So we haven't flown yet, but the amount of science and data and spin-offs that have come since the inception of the program in 2015, which is as long as I've been involved, has been tremendous. So we've tested spacesuits, IVA spacesuits, intravehicular activity spacesuits. We've tested them in zero gravity in parabolic flight. We've tested extravehicular activity spacesuits in different gravity settings through a gravity offset system. So if you can imagine wearing a suit, wearing a harness, which allows you to offload your weight to different degrees, then you can create microgravity or zero gravity environments, replicating work outside the ISS. You can replicate lunar or Martian gravity environments, so 1/6 and 1/3 gravity, respectively. We've tested the IVA spacesuit in a spacecraft crash landing scenario, so off-nominal when your spacecraft lands. And so say you have an off-nominal landing in the water, how does your spacesuit react in the water? So those are just some examples of what we've done. We've also done high altitude noctilucent cloud campaigns up in northern Alberta, which is where I live. So getting to northern Canada, and going up in an unpressurized research craft and using a tomography instrument to gather more data about noctilucent clouds. So we've done a lot. It's been a lot of fun, and I think one of the best parts is the type of people you meet, because every single one of my teammates, you know, they're top notch, top caliber. You know, they're excellent teammates, they're excellent scientists, they're professionals, they're operationally very good. And at the end of the day, they're some of the best friends you'll ever meet. So it's been a wild ride, but it's been a very, very fun one since I've been involved.
And you've had a couple of really cool experiences. One of them that in particular is one I've not gotten around to yet is wearing the spacesuit. You've actually been able to wear the Final Frontier Design spacesuit. Not only have you done that, you've worn it on a micro-G flight. So that's two really cool things together. Like, that's about as close as you're going to get to being in space other than being in space. So can you share with us a little bit about those experiences?
Yeah, absolutely. So for those who don't know, actually, Ron and I have done a parabolic flight campaign together, which is a lot of fun. And so for those who don't know, parabolic flight is a way to recreate a microgravity or zero gravity environment without leaving the confines of Earth. And so if you can imagine an airplane flying in parabolas, and so your airplane accelerates upwards at 2 gravities and then levels out, and then you're falling at the same rate as the plane, so you're weightless for up to 30 seconds at a time, and then you pull out at 2G, and then you continue that trajectory. And so you can actually create microgravity environments for a short period of time and test various aspects of, in this case, the IVA spacesuit. But you can actually get a fair bit of science done. And so I've been doing parabolic flight campaigns since 2015. I've flown over 140 parabolas to date, and basically it's impossible not to wear a spacesuit and have a giant smile on your face. It's so much fun, and the amount of data you get, and you're working in teams. You're rehearsing, you're briefing, you're pre-briefing, you're debriefing. You know, you're working in very, very small focused teams and ironing out the kinks as they occur. So it's a lot of fun.
That's amazing. And so you've been able to do a whole lot within the space industry overall, but a big one is space medicine, and it's something that we're still learning about. So being in the lead on something like that, like last year we were just talking about it. There was some complications on the ISS, and doctors had to come in to help with it. So can you tell us the importance of understanding space medicine and what seems to me like it's still a very new field?
Yeah, and so, I mean, for as long as we've been sending humans into space, there's been space medicine. And the reason for that, in a nutshell, is that space is trying to kill you. And so, like I mentioned earlier, the spaceflight environment is totally unlike that on Earth. We have the luxury of taking 1G, or the gravity environment on Earth, for granted. And that's true of any living organism that has ever been on this planet. That all goes out the window when you go up into space. And so our longest running human space mission to date has been the International Space Station, which is the exact opposite of the spectrum. That's microgravity or zero gravity. And so what we know about the spaceflight environment is that every single body system is infected. So our bones lose density, our muscles lose mass, our heart decompensates. Our fluids shift upwards. The pressure in our central nervous system is increased, as well as in our eyes. Our immune system is suppressed. So there's all sorts of factors at play. And as you said, the field itself actually may not be all that new, although compared to other aspects of medicine, maybe it is relatively new. But the crazy thing is, after decades of human spaceflight, we're still learning about brand new phenomena. So a decade ago, we learned about the space adaptation neuroocular syndrome, for SANS, where we learned that the pressure in our central nervous system increases, causing headaches, visual changes. And, you know, in some cases, and preferentially in male astronauts, those vision changes are permanent. So that's a relatively new phenomenon of study. As of late last year, we're learning about the potential spaceflight to contribute to blood clots. And the question is, as we're planning on looking at more ambitious and further locales like the moon and Mars, we need to be thinking about those things, like how do we keep people safe if they're going away for 2 years at a time? And then, you know, what is the risk reward of pre-treating that? You know, what is the long-term sequelae of being in space for that long? What about radiation? So there's all these considerations. So in my mind, space medicine is just getting started, and there's so much that we have yet to learn and find out and find best practices for.
And so you know, I listed a ton of the things that you do earlier, and one of them is that you've done more than a few TEDx talks, and your most recent one was about exploration, which is, you know, a topic that I really love too. But I'm interested. What was the reason that you decided that was the next thing you wanted to speak on with all the other topics that you've discussed? And what do you hope was the takeaway for people from that talk?
Yeah, there's a few takeaways. And, you know, the question that we start it with is, what is exploration? Why does it matter? And what would life be like without exploration? And so, you know, we start with a basic definition, and, you know, exploration, to go where and learn where we have previously not been, where we have previously not known. Why does it matter? And it's not just that it's fundamentally an innate human trait to be curious. And I often, you know, come across the question like, why push the limits? Why does it matter? And I think there's two answers to that. So, and I think it's a lot when we talk about pushing our own limits and pushing our own, testing our own metal. So the short answer is, it's a lot like materials stress testing. So in engineering, when you're stress testing a material, you want to know what the limit is. And the reason why is because you want to know, A, that's a breaking point, and I don't want to go near that limit in the future, or you want to know, I can reinforce this material and go even further next time and push the limits and learn more and discover more. And it's the same with exploration. It's the same with discovery, and it's the same with character. So that's a big part of it. And then the second part of it is, it's a survival trait. Like, if we didn't ask, what if? You know, if we didn't ask, hey, how come, you know, when the X-ray films I put in my drawer far away from any type of ionizing radiation, but under a radioactive sample, how come the films became exposed? What does that mean? You know, why does mold not grow near penicillin? What is the significance of that? These were monumental discoveries in physics and medicine, respectively. And it's fundamental to our survival, and it's very based. And we need to keep asking these what if questions, whether we're talking about how they pertain to our survival as a species, in terms of climate change, in terms of finding solutions to solving a pandemic. The fundamental question of why explore is, it's an inherent trait that's fundamental to our survival.
So it looks like we've actually got a couple questions that I want to dive into. So I love this one. This was actually from one of the other Possum 13 members, and we haven't talked about that yet, and we'll jump into that one here in a moment. Shayla Redmond wants to know, what is next for the great Dr. Shawna Panyda? So what's coming up that maybe we don't know about, that maybe you can give us a hint into the future of what you're up to?
Oh, that's awesome. So first of all, hi, Shayla. You are awesome, and I love working with you. This is actually an excellent segue to something Shayla and I are working on. So I don't know if she meant to plug it, but I'm going to plug it. So through Project Possum, because as I alluded to earlier, there's lots and lots of characteristics about the astronaut mentality and astronautics that actually pertain to life during a pandemic, whether it's being resourceful, whether it's dealing with isolation. So she and I are co-directing a project called the Astronaut Mentality webinar series, and that kicks off Wednesday. And in the Possum community, like I said, we have so many incredibly talented, experienced, knowledgeable individuals. Each webinar is an hour long, and it's moderated by one of our Possum members followed by a 15-minute short keynote on anything related to isolation, lessons learned from analog environments, how to prepare what's in your go bag for an emergency. And then it's followed by a discussion with a reaction panel of other PASA members who've been in those scenarios. So we have physicians, we have commercial pilots, we have pilots who've been in the military, we have scientists, we have top 40, top 60 candidates in the NASA and CSA selections. It's going to be really wild. So that's one of the most upcoming next things. And then I've recently taken on directing the Possum Space Medicine Group. And so this is an initiative through it. We are creating a health task force, or we've created one for COVID to help deal with questions, create trusted resources. So keeping busy on that front. And then also we have our own internal working group that's working on developing research protocols, data, and technologies related to space health, wellness, medicine, safety. So I could go on. There's so much that's on the horizon, but I think I'll just keep it at that. But thanks for the question, Sheila.
And next up from Nicholas Common, we have how does intravenous therapy work in space? Is there a special machine, or was an IV drip type deal ever needed in space for anything like that?
There are protocols for sure. There are protocols for starting an IV. There are saline bags in space, and then they're not perfect. So I was at the World Extreme Medicine Conference in Scotland in November, and Serena Onion Chancellor, she's a NASA astronaut who still keeps her job as an internist while being a full-time astronaut, which is amazing and blows my mind. So she was talking about the discovery of the blood clot in the vein of the affected astronaut, and how they would inject low molecular weight heparin to help treat it. And she was showing this isn't necessarily an IV injection, but for them it was an intramuscular injection or subcutaneous injection. And so she was showing how she would have to draw up fluid in the vial, and then it would be drawn up in the syringe. And then because in zero gravity, the air and the water don't separate it out, she would have to swing her arm around to kind of create a centrifuge effect and have the water and the air separate themselves out. So whether you're talking about subcutaneous, intramuscular, IV injections, there's all sorts of challenges, but there are protocols for ISS. And what's really cool is I'm the head instructor of the space Possum's operational space medicine class. And so what we do is we challenge our students to take medical scenarios that can occur on EVA, on a surface EVA. Say you're out on the moon or Mars and a major medical incident happens, and we challenge them to come up with a design modification or solution to the suit that allows them to deal with the solution in the field. So that's a really good question, and the short answer is there are protocols for it, but there's also, and they do account for the challenges of the spaceflight environment.
That's awesome, and it looks like we have a fan comment here. Alexis was apparently very impressed by all the hours doing parabolas that you have.
Oh, thanks, Alexis. That's very that's very kind of you.
And we also, so there's a lot of people that are listening that are going to be inspired by all the things that you do. So is there any advice for, say, somebody that wants to follow in your footsteps, maybe wants to do their first TED Talk or really anything in that area with the myriad of things you do? And we really only touched on a few of them today, and I'm going to check. I think we still have a few more questions too. But just for those that may be listening that want to do what you do, what are your words of advice?
Oh gosh. First of all, go for it. Go dream as big as you possibly can, and then dream bigger. But realize that a dream without a plan is just that, it's a dream, it's not a goal. So then the second step is, what are your steps and what are your plans to get there? And so checklists for me run my life. Like, I don't get things done without checklists. And one really important skill that I learned through piloting actually is maintaining a rate of scan. And you don't have to be a pilot to understand this, because same principle as if you're driving a car. You're constantly scanning between the road ahead of you, between the rear view mirror, between your instrument panel and your dashboard. And the principle is, you want to see where you are in relation to where you've been and where you want to be, and what your status is on the way of getting there. And so goal setting is no different. For me, I set my long-term goals and then my intermediate-term goals, my short-term goals, and my immediate-term goals on the way to getting there. And then I constantly check in between all of them to see, okay, where am I at in relation to where I want to be? How far have I come? Am I making the progress that I want? Is my status what I want it to be? So I think that's the first thing about goal setting is have a plan. Second thing is have a backup plan because there's that saying, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face, and life is going to throw so many things at you. So what's your backup plan? What's your alternate route? We don't always get what we want, so
that's why you think
that's right. I had to throw that in there. And then the last thing is, if you're not sure if you should venture into a field because maybe you're underrepresented, or you just don't know, or you're scared, go ahead and start. Act like you belong there, because you do. As long as you're willing to work really, really hard, be a good teammate, willing to learn, and learn with humility and learn from your mistakes. Just start. So those would be my main pieces of advice.
That was awesome, and we do actually have one more question, and I think this leads perfectly into it. Bailey Burns wants to know if you can speak on the differences between leadership and followership. Like, what does it mean to follow? What does it mean to lead? And what's the importance of both of them?
Yeah, that's a great question, Bailey. Thanks for plugging in or for checking in, and short plug for Bailey. She's also one of the Possum 13. So hi. So it's funny because they're two sides of the same coin. And when I talk about leadership, I like to liken it to the mortar between the bricks. Because traditionally when we think about leadership, we think of the big boss at the head of the boardroom, the one who's sitting at the head of the table, the one who's leading from the front. And the best leaders really are the ones who do whatever possible to hold the team together. And that's where strength in leadership comes from. And so if you're thinking of a brick wall, a brick without mortar is useless. There's no strength there. And so leaders look for what needs to be done to let everyone else do their job. And even if that means leading from behind, taking on extra work, looking for the resources and advocating for the resources that their team does or needs to get things done, that's a huge part of it. And then followership is exactly, it's just part of the spectrum. You're exactly right, Bailey. They're not opposites. So part of leadership is knowing when to follow. And I've learned these lessons throughout daily life, in medicine, and through analog environments. Just because I have a certain title doesn't mean I always know the most. So for example, when I was commander on my last MDRS mission, I would frequently defer to my teammates who had more disaster or survival experience to lead, because it's knowing when to step back for the good of the team and the good of the mission. And so the way to tie leadership and followership together, one of my teammates actually put it really well from my Mars mission. He said, and he took this from his time based in the special forces, and he said he was taught it was always the mission, the men, then me. And so that's how I make my distinctions between leadership and followership. What will contribute to the success of the mission and the team? And so that's a really great question, and that's how I approach it.
And we brought it up a few times. I think it's a perfect place to kind of wrap up the conversation is Possum 13. There is the new competition is out there for people that want to join it. So maybe just a little quick breakdown of what it is and how people can find out more about it and get involved in this year's contest.
Yeah, absolutely. I am so thrilled to talk about this. So for those who don't know, Possum 13 is the Possum initiative to promote careers in science and STEM and space, in particular to underrepresented groups, particularly girls and women. And so the name Possum 13 actually comes from a historical example. So the Mercury 13 were put together by Dr. Lovelace back during the Mercury era, when women weren't allowed to fly. And this flight surgeon, he said, well, why are we assuming women aren't as capable? And he chose 13 pilots who had flown in the Second World War, all female. He put them through the same tests that the Mercury men had been put through, and they performed just as well, if not better, on these initial tests. And so in homage to the Mercury 13, the name Possum 13 was taken up. And this is our second year having formed the Possum 13. We have 13 amazing women ambassadors from the possum community. They're educators, they're physicians, they're scientists, they're amazing. And so what we launched as our first initiative was the Possum Microgravity Challenge, designed to encourage careers in space and science and scientific thinking to young girls aged 13 to 17. We ran our first microgravity campaign last year. We had submissions from Guatemala, from Mexico, from Syria. These girls were fantastic. These girls aged 13 to 17 submitted their payloads to fly in microgravity. And we actually flew one of the winners, Ivana Hernandez from Colombia, 16 years old, super bright, super smart, her and her payload on Parabolic flight last year, and she was such a delight to work with. And so it was really well received. It was really well done. So we're doing it all again this year. Because of the pandemic, you guys are in luck. We have extended the deadline until May 1st. So if you're interested, you can absolutely find out more. Just go onto the Possum website or Google Possum 13 Microgravity Challenge, and it will pop right up. Or you can send questions my way on social media at Shawna Panyda, and I will point you in the right direction. So another plug for one of the amazing initiatives that we're working on with Possum 13.
And so, I mean, this has really been a great interview, and I know that people are going to want to have more questions. And so if people want to reach out to you and ask you questions, just like you mentioned, how can they find you on social media, your website, all that fun stuff?
Yeah, for sure. So it's pretty easy. As long as you can spell my name, you will find me. So on Twitter and Instagram, I am at Shawna Pandya, SHAWNAPANDYA. On Facebook, my official page is Dr. Shawna Pandya. I've started recently video logging my experiences from a medical and space and science perspective on YouTube. So just Google Shawna Pandya. And then my website, of course, is shawnapandya.com. So any one of those methods, you'll find me there. Happy to respond to questions. So there you go.
That's awesome. And we're really looking forward to more with Shawna. So we really only touched on a few of the things that she's involved in, and we're looking forward to welcoming her to our full podcast, Space4U, and we can talk about the other 8 or 9 things that I mentioned in her description. So we're always really lucky to have Shawna be involved with anything we're doing. And again, if you have not found out the new date for Space Symposium, we're really excited to have her there. She's going to be doing a talk for us at New Gen, and it's going to be amazing. I'm sure. I have no idea what she's going to talk about yet, so we're going to leave a little bit with the vague book. But I'm excited to hear what she's going to talk to everyone about. So Shawna, thank you so much for coming on today. We greatly appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Ron. It was my pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you at Space Symposium, and I look forward to hearing your questions online.
All right. And everybody, that concludes this episode of the live edition of Space Foundation Space4U podcast. Keep your eyes and ears open for more Space4U episodes by checking out our social media outlets on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And of course, our website at spacefoundation.org. And if you haven't checked it out yet, we have a whole lot of education resources now available on discoverspace.org, which is our new auxiliary program. So please check that out. And on all those outlets and more, it's our goal to inspire, educate, connect, and advocate for the space community. Because at the Space Foundation, we will always have space for you. Thank you so much for joining. We'll see you on the next show this coming Friday with Deanna Alcindi, the Arabian Stargazer. Wait, over here. There we go.